Brian Norman Sr. It's like Bill Haney from Wish, right? And it's like, we want 2.5 million. It's like, how? Brian? Charles? What's his name? The other geezer? Adrian? Derek? No. Like, if you want, I'll show you a P&L on what I'm paying. And then they're like, Boots got 4 million for the purse bid. Do you know how purse bids work? Like, you haven't got a clue. This is easier for you to know. The payments for Boots and Norman for the unification, because of what Boots was prepared to take for the unification, would be a 50-50 split.
So you're saying that if you were offering 1.25 million to each of them?
I'm saying, no, it's much more than that. I'm saying that Boots has agreed to try and make this fight happen in a situation where basically they're going to get pretty much the same amount of money. Jaron Ennis, the best welterweight in the world, just sold out 15,000 at Wells Fargo, right? Massive TV deal with DAZN. He's moving his money to basically get the same as Brian Norman in a fight. Yet Brian Norman won't take 17 and a half times more than he made in his last fight. That's where the game is so messed up.
Breaking news, No Limit Boxing has won the purse bid over Top Rank for the Janibek fight. They bid $351,000 for both fighters, meaning that's both fighters' salary. That's what they're gonna have to split. Keep in mind, Janibek is an ESPN main event fighter. As a champion, he already fought on ESPN multiple times as the main event. Even then, he's only making less than $350,000 his next fight. But guess who's not an ESPN main event fighter and has never fought on a main event before? Brian Norman. In fact, his next fight, he's gonna fight on Keyshawn undercard for $200,000. Well, Brian Norman and his team believe the $1.7 million Eddie Hearn offered them to unify against Jaron Ennis was not enough. Even though Janibek, he's getting less than $350,000 his next fight. It's crazy because all of Brian Norman's team excuses are flying out of the window. They said they want 50-50 split to fight Jaron Ennis. Jaron Ennis made over $3 million his last fight. Well, Eddie Hearn responded to that. He said that's not how purse bid works. Because Jaron Ennis was the A side, he received 85% of the split. That's why they bid that much, because they kept most of the money. But Brian Norman's team have no clue how this works. Additionally, Eddie Hearn revealed Jaron Ennis was in fact taking a pay cut in order to fight Brian Norman. Meaning, Jaron Ennis gave up some of his purse in order to give it to Brian Norman so Brian Norman can fight him. Every time Brian Norman received a bigger offer from Eddie Hearn, that was because Jaron Ennis was giving up some of his purse to give it to Brian Norman so Brian Norman can fight him to no avail. I mean, how many champions today that you guys know of who are willing to do something like that or who did something like that? Not too many. Well, for the people that say Jaron Ennis is not trying to do his best to make these fights come to fruition, he's not making the necessary sacrifices, this, that, and the third, all of that has already been debunked. This is more proof that Jaron Ennis has been trying to do his best to give these fighters more courage to get in the ring with him by paying them from his own freaking purse. Jaron Ennis agreed to a 50-50 split to fight Brian Norman in a unification. That's what Eddie Hearn revealed, as you guys heard it from Eddie Hearn himself. Jaron Ennis, the guy who sold 15,000 tickets his last fight by carrying the entire event by himself, he agreed to a 50-50 split against Brian Norman, who made 100K his last fight and is going to make 200K his next fight. As crazy as that sounds, Brian Norman turned down a 50-50 split that he doesn't deserve, where he could have had made $1.7 million in a unification fight against Jaron Ennis as the main event, to fight on Keyshawn undercard for $200,000. That makes no logical sense. How you gonna turn down 17x your biggest payday to going back to making 200K, back to the 100K mark? People want to re-up. Brian Norman and his team want to re-down. Well, their latest excuse is that Brian Norman is going to have to pay taxes. He's going to have to pay 20% to his promoter. He's going to have to pay 10% to his trainer. He's going to have to pay 10% to his manager. So what is he going to walk away with from that 1.7 million? Around 800 to 900K? Man, that's like saying, when I fight Jaron Ennis, you telling me I have to breathe air? The reason why I say that, Brian Norman and his team are acting as if the fans are a bunch of fools. Like we're gonna fall for anything. What do you mean? You have to pay taxes. You have to pay top rank 20%. You have to pay the trainer 10%. You have to pay the manager this percent. You have to pay that regardless. It doesn't matter who you fight. You can fight Joe Blow or Jaron Ennis. You have to do that regardless. So why is it a problem now that you fighting Jaron Ennis? That's like saying or complaining about breathing air fighting Jaron Ennis. Why are you complaining about the stuff you got to do regardless of who you fight? It really shows when a fighter doesn't want to fight. Fighters 100% of the times have to pay taxes. They have to pay the promoter 20%. They have to pay the trainer 10%. They have to pay the manager whatever percent. But Brian Norman's team, they bringing that up as if they only have to do that against Jaron Ennis. But they didn't have to do that when they are fighting Derek on Keyshawn undercard, which is the farthest thing from the truth. Paying taxes, paying your promoter, paying your trainer, paying your manager is like breathing air in the sport of boxing. You got to do that stuff regardless of who you fight. So why are you complaining about the stuff you got to do regardless? Is the $1 million question. Clearly, Jaron Ennis caught Brian bluff about wanting to fight. You see, Jaron Ennis, just like any other fighter that wants to fight the best, he looked at this as an opportunity. Let me go ahead and make 1.7 million fighting Brian Norman. Let me go ahead and take this pay cut, even though I already got paid more to fight a nobody, because after this sacrifice, I'm going to be a unified champ. I'm going to be in a better position. On the other hand, Brian Norman, he didn't look at it the same way. He didn't look at it, okay, this is 17x my biggest payday. I done got Jaron Ennis to agree to a 50-50 split. Man, what a great opportunity this is to unify the division, beat Jaron Ennis, and then demand 4 to 5 million in the rematch as the A side. That's what any fighter in Brian Norman's shoes would think. But the way Brian Norman's actual team revealed how they felt being in Brian Norman boots, they were like, what? 1.7 million to fight Jaron Ennis and possibly get Brian Norman's career over with? That's not enough money. The reason why they felt that's not enough money, even though it's 17x their biggest payday, is due to the fact they are not going into the fight thinking they are going to win the fight and become a unified champ so they can capitalize on this payday and legacy fight to come back in the rematch and make double that. Absolutely not. They're not looking at it like that. They're looking at it as if this is a suicide mission, as if They are selling their that's right. The way Brian Norman teams sound. They talking as if they telling Eddie Hearn, how much are you willing to pay us for Brian Norman to get KO'd by Jaron Ennis and possibly get his career over with? Oh yeah, 1.7 million is not enough to do all that. You see, Eddie Hearn is not paying Brian Norman 1.7 million to get KO'd. No, he's paying him for the opportunity to become a unified champ. How the fighters feel and how confident the team feels, that's on them. We know Jaron Ennis doesn't feel that way. Jaron Ennis feels that nobody can beat him. However, Brian Norman feels that Jaron Ennis will beat him, and most likely by KO, which is why the 1.7 million 17x, his biggest payday, is not enough to unify the division and become great. Which is why Brian Norman is back to the regular routine, which is fighting no-name fighters for 200K. Yeah, that's 10 times less than what Jaron Ennis offered him, but that's also not a guaranteed KO loss. Clearly, that's how Brian Norman team feels. Regardless of what they say publicly about Jaron Ennis, we all know how they truly feel about Jaron Ennis. They heavily respect him, and that's why they're not trying to get in the ring with him. With the opinions out of the door and the facts laid out on the table, go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe below. And to be continued on the next episode of Akhi TV. Peace out. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.